If you're trying to cut your teeth on jig fishing or take your jig fishing to that next level, this is one of the more common mistakes that I see anglers make, and if you can correct this, boy, I guarantee you're going to get more bites. So the issue is how the jig falls. It is so critically important when you're dropping a jig into cover or fishing it along some sort of vertical structure that the jig falls perfectly straight. We've got to have a vertical drop. Well, that means we have to let that jig fall on a slack line. If we're fishing shallow cover or shallow structure, this usually isn't an issue, because when we go ahead and we pitch that jig out there, when it hits the water, that bow in the line is going to provide enough slack to drop 2, 3, 4 feet. Not going to be a big deal. But if what you're targeting is deeper, that slack line is going to make the difference between getting some potential bites and getting probably 0 bites. So if we take a look here, when this jig falls on a slack line, dropping completely vertical, and there is nice action imparted onto whatever trailer that you're going to go ahead and put on there. This happens to be a Rage Crawl, but you can see there's enough pull from the gravity going straight down that it imparts action on the trailer. Well, as soon as that slack line runs out, we get this pendulum action. And if you notice here, as soon as that slack stops and the pendulum starts, the trailer immediately quits moving right away. Not to mention, it doesn't look natural at all. Now, as we move into the warmer months, and summer's not that far away, and even well into the fall, those fish in most bodies of water are going to move out just a little bit deeper and oftentimes suspend. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I have been pitching jigs along docks, dock pilings, or even floating docks, and let that jig drop down and catch bass that are suspended partway between the bottom and the actual dock. That slack line is so important in that situation. And those bass can be suspended also along, let's say, seawalls, along some bluff banks and highland type reservoirs. All of those are situations where you may have bass sitting at 15, 20 feet, and we've got to feed enough slack line to keep that jig dropping straight. So if that means as the jig's falling, you have to go ahead and peel a little bit, that is completely okay. Now, you may be asking, what about the bite, especially if you're new to jig fishing? Well, there's 2 things that we need to be looking for to make sure that we are alerted for a potential bite. One, as that is falling on that slack line, look for the slightest twitch, or sometimes the line will just bounce just the tiniest little bit there as the line is laying up on the top of the water. So really look for that. You see just the slightest movement, go ahead and set that hook. The other thing that we need to have some sort of idea about is how deep are we fishing. So how long approximately should that jig take to get to the bottom where it's going to stop falling? I'll never forget, I was fishing on Smith Mountain Lake in Virginia, and this happened multiple times. These docks were sitting probably over 20-25 foot of water, if I remember correctly, and I was pitching finesse jigs along these docks, and as that lure would fall, only after maybe 2 or 3 seconds on the drop, all of a sudden the line would stop pulling down into the water. It's not because I hit bottom, it's because a fish had inhaled that thing and not moved. So when you see that, you're like, whoa, wait a minute, I thought it was deeper than that. Set the hook, you've probably got a fish that is on. That's a difficult bite to learn, but if you're watching that line and have an idea of the depth, you can pick up on it pretty quick. And hey, if you would like to watch a video on skipping jigs and some of the details and nuances about how to perfect this presentation, man, I'm telling you, that can take your jig fishing to just a whole nother level. Go ahead and check this one out right here, and make sure to go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.